The story of the Great Library does not begin with a building, but with a dream of a single unified world where knowledge could flow like water across the oceans. It begins with Alexander the Great, who stood upon the golden sands of Egypt in the year 331 BC and looked out over the Mediterranean Sea. He saw a natural harbor, protected by an island, and imagined a city that would bridge the lands of Egypt with the civilizations of Greece and beyond. He took a handful of grain to mark the outlines of the streets because he had no chalk, and the birds flew down to eat the grain, which his seers interpreted as a sign that this city would feed the world, not just with food, but with ideas. Alexander died before he could see his city rise, but his general Ptolemy I, Soter, took the throne of Egypt and declared himself pharaoh. Ptolemy was a man of war who had spent his life in battles, but in his later years he sought a different kind of legacy. He wanted to create a capital that would outshine Athens and rival the glories of the ancient pharaohs. He consulted with the exiled Athenian statesman Demetrius of Phalerum, who told him that if he wanted true power, he must collect the books of all the peoples of the earth. Demetrius described a place where every scroll and every map and every piece of poetry ever written would be gathered under one roof. The construction began in the royal quarter of the city, near the great harbor, where the sea breeze would cool the hot Egyptian air. It was not merely a library as we understand it today, but a part of a larger complex called the Masion, which meant the Temple of the Muses. The architects used white limestone and marble that gleamed so brightly under the sun that it served as a beacon for ships arriving from across the sea. There were colonnades paved with stone, where scholars could walk in the shade and discuss the motion of the stars or the anatomy of the human body. There were gardens filled with exotic plants brought from the far reaches of the known world, and fountains that provided the soothing sound of running water to aid in concentration and thought. Before we return to the quiet halls of the ancient world, take a moment to settle deeper into your relaxation. If these journeys into history bring you peace and help you find the rest you deserve, please consider subscribing to this channel. By joining our community, you ensure that these stories continue to flow, allowing us to explore the universe and the past together night after night. Now let us turn our eyes back to the coast of Egypt, where the history of the Great Library faces its first great trial. At the heart of this complex stood the Great Library itself. It was a massive structure designed to hold hundreds of thousands of papyrus scrolls. The shelves were made of cedar wood imported from Lebanon because the oil in the cedar helped to repel the insects and worms that might eat the delicate paper. The scrolls were not stacked flat, but were kept in cubbyholes called armaria, and each scroll had a small tag hanging from the end identifying its title and author. The smell of the library was distinct, a mixture of dry papyrus, the cedar wood of the shelves, and the faint salty tang of the sea air drifting in through the high windows. Ptolemy sent agents to every corner of the known world with unlimited funds and a single command to buy books. They went to the book markets of Athens and Rhodes. They traveled east to the lands of Persia and India. They went south deep into Egypt to copy the ancient temple records of the priests. The hunger for books was so great that a law was passed in Alexandria requiring every ship that docked in the harbor to surrender any books it carried. These books were taken to the library and copied by scribes. The library kept the originals and returned the copies to the ship captains, which earned these books the name of ship's funds. The library grew rapidly, and soon it required a second building called the Serapeum to hold the overflow of knowledge. It is estimated that at its height, the library held nearly 500,000 scrolls. This was the first time in human history that an attempt was made to gather the sum total of human knowledge in one place. It was a sanctuary where the barriers of language and culture were dissolved. A scholar could sit at a long wooden table and unroll a scroll written by a Babylonian astronomer next to a text on geometry by a Greek mathematician. The first head librarian was Zenodorus of Ephesus, who undertook the monumental task of organizing the chaos of texts. He invented a system of classification that allowed a reader to find a specific poem or history among the thousands of shelves. He also established the tradition of critical editing, where scholars would compare different manuscripts of the same work to determine which version was the most accurate. The library became a hive of activity, but it was a quiet activity. The only sounds were the scratching of reed pens on papyrus, the rustling of scrolls being unrolled, and the low murmurs of debates between the greatest minds of the age. One of the most famous scholars to work within these walls was Eratosthenes. He was a mathematician and geographer who served as the chief librarian. It was here in the quiet halls of Alexandria that he calculated the circumference of the earth with astonishing accuracy, using only the length of shadows cast by sticks at different locations in Egypt. He drew one of the first maps of the world, incorporating the knowledge brought back by explorers and sailors. He sat in the cool shade of the colonnade and looked at the horizon, realizing that the world was vast and round and capable of being understood through mathematics. Another resident was Euclid, the father of geometry, who wrote his famous work Elements while living in Alexandria. He taught that there was a logical structure to the universe that could be proven through lines and angles and circles. His presence drew students from all over the Mediterranean, who came to learn the secrets of logic and proof. The library provided them with housing and food and a salary so that they would not be distracted by the need to earn a living. Their only duty was to think and to write and to teach. The library also housed the works of the great poets and playwrights. The complete works of Homer, including the Iliad and the Odyssey, were carefully edited and preserved here. The plays of Sophocles and Euripides, which might have been lost to time, were copied and studied. The librarians were not just collectors, they were guardians of culture. They understood that a scroll was fragile and could easily burn or rot. So they made constant copies to ensure that the words of the ancestors would survive for future generations. In the medical wing of the Mauseon, doctors like Herophilus made groundbreaking discoveries about the human body. They were the first to distinguish between veins and arteries, and to understand that the brain was the center of the nervous system. They had access to texts on Egyptian medicine, which was thousands of years old, and combined it with Greek rational inquiry. The library allowed them to stand on the shoulders of giants and see further than anyone before them. As the sun set over Alexandria, the library would not close. Lamps filled with olive oil were lit, casting a warm golden glow over the rows of scrolls. The scholars would continue their work late into the night, driven by an insatiable curiosity. The silence of the library at night was profound. Outside the city was alive with the noise of sailors and merchants and the bustling markets. But inside the walls, there was a peace that allowed the mind to travel to distant stars, and ancient times. It was a cathedral of thought, dedicated to the belief that understanding the world was the highest calling of humanity. The work of organizing this vast ocean of knowledge fell to a scholar named Callimachus of Cyrene, who was a poet and a critic with a mind that sought order in chaos. He created something that had never existed before, which was a comprehensive catalog of the library's contents, called the Penachus. It was not merely a list of titles, but a map of Greek literature and science that occupied 120 scrolls of its own. Callimachus divided the authors into categories such as rhetoric and law and epic poetry and tragedy and medicine, so that a reader could trace the lineage of an idea from its birth to its present form. He recorded the opening words of each work and the number of lines it contained to ensure that no scribe had removed a section or altered the text. Through his work, the library became not just a warehouse of paper, but a living brain where memories were stored and retrieved with precision. Under the reign of Ptolemy II, Philadelphus, the ambition of the library expanded even further beyond the borders of Greek thought. The king possessed a deep curiosity about the sacred texts of other nations, and he turned his eyes toward the Hebrew scriptures. He sent ambassadors to Jerusalem with rich gifts of gold and precious stones to the high priest, requesting elders who could translate the Torah into Greek. Tradition tells us that 72 scholars arrived in Alexandria and were taken to the quiet island of Pharos, just off the coast where the great lighthouse stood. They worked in seclusion with the sound of the waves as their only companion, and produced the Septuagint, which was the first translation of the Hebrew Bible. This monumental task bridged two ancient cultures and allowed the wisdom of the prophets to be read by philosophers in Athens and Rome. The library was also a place of mechanical wonder, where the abstract theories of mathematics were turned into physical machines. It was here that the great inventor Archimedes of Syracuse came to study in his youth. While walking along the banks of the Nile and observing the farmers struggling to lift water from the river to their fields, he conceived of the Archimedes screw. It was a simple, yet brilliant device consisting of a hollow pipe with a spiral inside that could pull water upward against gravity when turned. This invention, born from the theoretical atmosphere of the library, changed the face of agriculture in Egypt and is still used in parts of the world today. The gardens of the Mausoleum were filled with such automata and mechanical birds that sang by the pressure of water and air, which delighted the court and demonstrated the power of engineering. Astronomy flourished in the clear night air of Egypt, where the stars seemed to hang low over the desert. Aristarchus of Samos sat in the observatory of the library and watched the movements of the moon and the planets. He was the first man to propose the radical idea that the Earth was not the center of the universe, but that it revolved around the sun. His calculations were written on scrolls that were stored in the astronomy section, where later generations would read them and debate the nature of the cosmos. The librarians charted the constellations and created star catalogs that guided sailors across the Mediterranean Sea, helping to bind the commercial world closer together through the safety of navigation. The daily life of the library was sustained by an army of scribes and preservationists who worked silently in the background. The papyrus scroll was a fragile medium made from the pith of the reed that grew in the marshes of the Nile. It was susceptible to dampness and rot and the wear of constant handling. In the scriptorium, master craftsmen mixed glue from flour and vinegar to repair tears in the ancient manuscripts. They washed old sheets to remove the ink so they could be reused for lesser notes, and they rolled the finished scrolls on rods of ivory or wood. The ink they used was a mixture of lampblack and gum arabic and water, which created a deep black pigment that has remained legible for thousands of years. The rhythmic dipping of pens and the smoothing of papyrus sheets created a backdrop of industry that supported the higher pursuits of the mind. As the years turned into centuries, the library became the memory of the world. It held the history of the Egyptian dynasties written by the priest Manetho, who could read the hieroglyphs that were already becoming mysterious to the Greeks. It held the accounts of the voyages of Pytheas, who had sailed north past the Pillars of Hercules to the frozen seas of the Arctic and described the midnight sun. It held the medical treatises of Hippocrates, which taught that disease was natural and not a punishment from the gods. Every time a fire destroyed a city or a war wiped out a culture, the library preserved what remained of its thought. It was a fortress against forgetting. The architecture of the complex continued to evolve as new kings added their own touches to the legacy. Ptolemy III was so desperate to acquire the original official texts of the three great tragedians, Aeschylus and Sophocles and Euripides, that he paid an enormous deposit to the Athenians to borrow them for copying. Once he had the originals in Alexandria, he decided to forfeit his deposit and keep the originals, sending the copies back to Athens instead. He expanded the daughter library at the Serapeum, which was open to the public and not just the royal scholars. The Serapeum was built on a hill with 100 steps leading up to it, and it housed the surplus scrolls that the main library could no longer contain. It was a masterpiece of columned halls and quiet recesses where the citizens of Alexandria could touch the knowledge of the ancients. There were also women who walked the halls of the library and contributed to its glory. Although their names appear less frequently in the surviving records, we know of scholars like Aglaonike, who studied the moon and could predict eclipses with such accuracy that the common people believed she had the power to draw the moon down from the sky. There were female painters and poets whose works were catalogued in the Pinakes. The library was a place where the mind was valued above all else, and where the pursuit of truth created a community that transcended the usual boundaries of society. The discussions that took place under the marble porticos covered every subject, from the nature of the soul to the breeding of horses and the properties of medicinal herbs. The influence of the library extended far beyond the walls of Alexandria. It set the standard for the Greek language and the format of books. The scholars decided on the use of accents to help pronounce words, and they standardized the division of the Iliad and the Odyssey into 24 books each. When you read a book today and see a margin or a punctuation mark or a chapter division, you are seeing the ghostly fingerprint of the librarians of Alexandria. They developed the tools of reading and writing that we still use to navigate the world of text. They understood that information without organization is useless, and so they built the infrastructure of the intellect. The city of Alexandria itself was a reflection of the library's cosmopolitan spirit. It was a city of glass and linen and papyrus. The lighthouse of Alexandria, which was one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world, stood as a physical counterpart to the library. While the lighthouse guided ships through the dangerous waters of the harbor, the library guided minds through the dangerous waters of ignorance. Both were beacons of light in a chaotic world. The light from the Pharos could be seen for 30 miles out to sea, and the knowledge from the library reached much further, touching minds in Rome and Byzantium and eventually the modern world. As the Roman Republic began to rise in the West, the library remained a prize that was envied by all. Roman generals and statesmen who visited Egypt were awestruck by the sheer volume of wealth and wisdom contained within the Mausoleum. They saw it as the ultimate symbol of civilized power. When Julius Caesar arrived in Alexandria in pursuit of his rival Pompey, the history of the library entered a new and more turbulent chapter. But before the fires and the riots, the library enjoyed a long golden afternoon of peace, where the only wars fought were wars of words, and the only conquests were conquests of discovery. In the year 48 BC, the silence of the library was shattered, not by the arguments of philosophers, but by the roar of war. Julius Caesar had arrived in Alexandria and found himself besieged in the royal palace by the Egyptian army. In a desperate attempt to repel the enemy fleet that blocked his escape, Caesar ordered his soldiers to set fire to the ships in the harbor. The wood of the ships was dry and coated in pitch, and they burned with a terrifying intensity. The wind that night was blowing from the sea toward the land, and it carried the sparks and the flames from the burning masts onto the docks. The fire leaped from the warehouses to the nearby buildings, and the smoke began to curl around the white columns of the royal quarter. Historians have debated for centuries exactly what was lost that night. Some say the Great Library itself was consumed by the flames, while others believe that it was only the warehouses near the docks, which held 40,000 scrolls waiting to be cataloged, that were destroyed. Regardless of the extent of the damage, it was a wound to the collective memory of mankind. The smell of burning papyrus, which is the smell of ash and dried reed, drifted through the city, and the scholars watched in horror as the work of generations was threatened by the mindless destruction of battle. Yet the library was resilient. It survived the siege and the fire and continued to stand, although the scars of that night would remain as a reminder of how fragile knowledge can be in the face of power. The last great patron of the library from the royal dynasty was Cleopatra VII. She was a woman of immense intellect who was said to be the only monarch of her line who took the trouble to learn the Egyptian language along with Greek and half a dozen others. She did not see the library merely as a trophy, but as a tool of statecraft and personal enlightenment. She held court in the Mausoleum, surrounded by mathematicians and astronomers, and used the knowledge contained there to impress the Roman generals who came to conquer her land. She understood that while Rome had the might of legions, Alexandria had the might of the mind. After the death of Caesar, the Roman general Mark Antony sought to win the favor of Cleopatra, and he knew that there was no gift she valued more than books. In a grand gesture that depleted one of the great rivals of Alexandria, Antony seized the library of Pergamum in what is now Turkey. Pergamum had built up a collection of 200,000 scrolls and had been the only true competitor to Alexandria in the Mediterranean world. Antony had these scrolls packed into crates and shipped across the sea to Egypt. It was a transfer of knowledge on a massive scale, a restitution for the scrolls lost in the fire of Caesar. This gift replenished the shelves and ensured that Alexandria remained the undisputed capital of learning. This rivalry between Alexandria and Pergamum gave birth to an invention that changed the history of writing. Years before, when the kings of Egypt realized that Pergamum was trying to poach their librarians and rival their collection, they placed an embargo on the export of papyrus. Since papyrus only grew in the Nile Delta, this effectively cut off the supply of paper to the rest of the world. Forced to find an alternative, the scholars of Pergamum perfected the use of treated animal skins, which came to be known as parchment. While papyrus was brittle and could crack, parchment was durable and smooth. Although Alexandria stuck to its traditional papyrus, the invention of parchment would eventually allow books to survive the damp climates of Europe in the centuries to come. With the fall of Cleopatra and the annexation of Egypt by Rome, the library entered a new era. It was no longer the private project of the Ptolemaic kings, but a public institution under the protection of the Roman emperors. Augustus Caesar visited the tomb of Alexander and paid his respects to the city's founder, and he affirmed the privileges of the scholars. The library became a tourist attraction for the Roman elite. Young men from noble families in Rome would travel to Athens to learn rhetoric, and then to Alexandria to finish their education in science and medicine. The city became a melting pot where the pragmatic engineering of Rome met the theoretical brilliance of Greece. The Emperor Claudius, who was a scholar himself and wrote histories of the Etruscans and the Carthaginians, felt a deep kinship with the library. He added a new wing to the Museion, which was named after him, where his own histories were to be read aloud once a year. It was a time of stability, where the Pax Romana allowed for the safe travel of scholars from Gaul to Syria. The library continued to collect books, but the nature of the scholarship began to shift. The era of great original discoveries was slowly giving way to an era of commentary and compilation. Scholars spent more time analyzing the works of the giants who came before them, writing lengthy explanations of Homer and Euclid, rather than forging entirely new paths. Yet there were still flashes of brilliance that illuminated the halls. Hero of Alexandria, a mathematician and engineer who worked in the 1st century AD, created machines that seemed like magic. He invented the aeolipile, which was a primitive steam engine that spun a metal sphere using jets of steam. He built the first vending machine, which dispensed holy water when a coin was inserted into a slot. He designed automatic doors for temples that opened when a fire was lit on an altar, using the expansion of heated air to drive a system of weights and pulleys. His works were stored in the library, and they show a mind that was teasing the edges of the Industrial Revolution, almost 2,000 years before it happened. The library also became a center for the study of astronomy under the Roman rule. The astronomer Claudius Ptolemy, who is not related to the royal dynasty, spent his life in Alexandria observing the heavens. He wrote the Almagest, which was a comprehensive treatise on the motions of the stars and planets. He compiled a catalog of over 1,000 stars and established the geocentric model of the universe, which placed the Earth at the center. While this model was eventually proven wrong, it was a masterpiece of mathematical reasoning that allowed astronomers to predict the positions of the planets with great accuracy for 14 centuries. His scrolls were among the most precious possessions of the library, copied and recopied by generations of students. Life in the library was not without its petty rivalries and academic disputes. The scholars who lived in the Museion were sometimes mocked by the satirical writers of the time, who called them birds in a gilded cage. They were fed at the public expense and exempt from taxes, and they spent their days arguing over the interpretation of rare words or the authenticity of ancient verses. Yet this protected environment was essential for the preservation of knowledge. In a world where most people labored in the fields from dawn to dusk, merely to survive the existence of a place where men and women could dedicate their lives to reading and thinking was a miracle of civilization. As the centuries wore on, the city of Alexandria began to suffer from the volatile politics of the Roman Empire. There were riots between the Greek and Jewish and Egyptian populations of the city, and the library often found itself in the middle of the chaos. The Emperor Caracalla, in a fit of paranoia and rage, expelled the foreign scholars from the Mausoleum and suspended their stipends. It was a blow to the international character of the institution. The flow of funds became less certain, and the maintenance of the vast collection became more difficult. Scrolls that rotted in the humidity were not always replaced, and the scriptorium was not as busy as it had been in the Golden Age. Despite these challenges, the reputation of the library was such that it remained the intellectual capital of the world. And Neoplatonist philosophers who sought to combine the rational philosophy of Plato with a mystical understanding of the divine made Alexandria their home. Plotinus and his students walked the same colonnades where Euclid had walked, teaching that the material world was a reflection of a higher spiritual reality. The library contained the texts that allowed them to synthesize the wisdom of the East and the West, creating a philosophy that would deeply influence the development of theology in the centuries to follow. The physical decline of the library was a slow process rather than a single catastrophic event. It was like the aging of a great mountain that is worn down by wind and rain over eons. A fire during the crisis of the 3rd century, when the Emperor Aurelian fought to retake the city from Queen Zenobia of Palmyra, may have caused significant damage to the royal quarter known as the Bruchion, where the main library stood. The precise details are lost to the fog of history, but it is clear that the once unified collection was becoming fragmented. Books were moved to private collections or to the Serapeum for safekeeping, as the main buildings fell into disrepair. The atmosphere in Alexandria began to change as the Roman Empire adopted Christianity. What was once a city of open philosophical debate became a battleground of religious ideologies. The library, which was filled with the texts of pagan gods and ancient rituals, began to be viewed by some zealots not as a treasury of wisdom, but as a fortress of demons. The old ways of the Greeks, where gods lived in statues and wisdom was found in geometry, clashed with the new fervor of the early church, which sought to purge the world of idolatry. The scholars who had once walked the streets with the respect of kings now found themselves looking over their shoulders. The funding from the emperors dried up as the priorities of the state shifted from the maintenance of culture to the defense of the borders and the building of churches. In the year 391, the tension reached a breaking point. The Patriarch Theophilus of Alexandria, a man of fiery temper and immense political ambition, obtained permission from the Emperor Theodosius to destroy the pagan temples of the city. The Serapeum, which housed the daughter library and had stood for centuries as a public sanctuary, became the target of a violent mob. The great doors were smashed open, and the statues were toppled from their pedestals. The scrolls that had been stored there for safekeeping were pulled from the shelves. We do not know if they were burned in a great bonfire, or scattered to the winds, or simply left to rot in the mud. But the result was the same. The daughter library ceased to exist. It was a day when the light of the ancient world flickered and dimmed. Yet even in these darkening times, there remained a bright star. Hypatia was the daughter of Theon, the last known head of the Malcyon. She was born into the library and raised among the scrolls. Her father taught her mathematics and astronomy, and she surpassed him in both. She became the leading Neoplatonist teacher in Alexandria, drawing students from high society, including the future prefect of the city Orestes and the bishop Synesius. She walked the streets in the tribon, the cloak of a philosopher, and taught anyone who would listen about the works of Plato and Aristotle. She represented the last breath of the true Alexandrian spirit, which held that reason and inquiry were the keys to the divine. Hypatia is credited with writing commentaries on the arithmetics of Diophantus and the conics of Apollonius. She constructed astrolabes for measuring the positions of the stars and hydrometers for determining the density of liquids. She was a woman of science in an age of superstition, but her prominence and her refusal to convert to the new faith made her a target. In the year 415, a mob led by a lector named Peter dragged her from her carriage as she was returning home. They took her to a church called the Caesareum, where they stripped her and murdered her with tiles. Her death marked the effective end of the intellectual life of the library. Many of the remaining scholars, seeing what had happened to the most brilliant among them, packed their scrolls and fled to Athens, or Constantinople, or Persia, taking the fragments of the library with them. The physical buildings of the royal quarter, where the main library had once stood, continued to decay. Earthquakes, which were common in the region, toppled the columns and cracked the walls. The rising sea levels and the sinking of the coastline slowly swallowed parts of the ancient harbor. The great lighthouse eventually fell into ruin, its stones used to build a fortress that still stands today. The library did not vanish in a single moment, but faded away like a dream upon waking. The papyrus scrolls, which required constant recopying, turned to dust in the abandoned storehouses. The memory of where the books were kept was lost, and the city moved on. The final chapter of the library's history is written in the sands of the 7th century. In the year 642, the Arab army led by the general Amr ibn al-As captured Alexandria after a long siege. The city they found was a shadow of its former glory, but it was still magnificent compared to the desert towns of Arabia. There is a famous story that is likely a legend, but speaks to the symbolic end of the library. It is said that Amr wrote to the Caliph Omar, asking what to do with the books remaining in the royal libraries. The Caliph replied that if the books agreed with the Quran, they were superfluous, and if they disagreed, they were heretical. So either way, they should be destroyed. The story goes that the scrolls were distributed to the 4,000 public baths of Alexandria, where they were used as fuel for the furnaces, keeping the water warm for 6 months. While most historians doubt the literal truth of this tale, it serves as a poetic eulogy for the loss of knowledge. What was lost is impossible to fully quantify. We know that we have lost the vast majority of Greek literature. We have only 7 of the dozens of plays written by Aeschylus and 7 by Sophocles. We have lost the full history of the world written by Berosus the Babylonian. We have lost the star catalogues of Hipparchus and the medical texts that might have advanced science by 1,000 years if they had survived. The burning of the library set humanity back by centuries, forcing the scholars of the Renaissance to painfully reconstruct what the ancients had already known. The silence left by the library is the silence of the Dark Ages. However, the story of the library is not entirely a tragedy. It is also a story of survival. Before the destruction, thousands of manuscripts were copied and carried away to other lands. The monks of Ireland and the scholars of Baghdad and the scribes of Constantinople preserved the sparks of the fire. The Almagest of Ptolemy was translated into Arabic and then into Latin, eventually finding its way to the desk of Copernicus. The Elements of Euclid became the standard textbook for geometry in Europe for 2,000 years. The medical writings of Galen, which were studied in Alexandria, formed the basis of medicine until the modern era. The library did not die completely because its spirit had already spread too far to be extinguished. The dream of the library also survived. It became the archetype for every great library that followed. The House of Wisdom in Baghdad, the Bodleian in Oxford, the Library of Congress in Washington, all look back to Alexandria as their ancestor. They are all attempts to recreate that original vision of a universal repository of knowledge. In the modern city of Alexandria, a new library, the Bibliotheca Alexandrina, was inaugurated in the year 2002. It stands near the site of the ancient one, a massive disk of glass and stone tilting toward the sea like a rising sun. Its walls are carved with letters from every alphabet in the world, a tribute to the idea that knowledge belongs to all of humanity. As we look back at the history of the Library of Alexandria, we see more than just a collection of books. We see the highest aspirations of the human race. We see the desire to understand the universe, to preserve the past, and to connect with one another across time and space. We see the fragility of civilization and the constant need to protect it from ignorance and destruction. The library was a lighthouse in the ocean of time, and although its light was dimmed, it was never truly put out. Now, as the story comes to a close, let the image of that white city by the sea fade gently from your mind. Imagine the sound of the waves lapping against the stone harbor, the rustle of the palm trees in the garden of the Mausion, and the quiet scratching of a reed pen on papyrus. The scrolls are safe, the scholars are at rest, and the wisdom of the ages is waiting for you in your dreams. The history is written, and the book is closed. Sleep now in the peace of knowing that nothing is ever truly lost as long as we remember. The legacy and the rebirth. The story of the library does not truly end in the ashes of Alexandria, because ideas are harder to kill than buildings. When the lights went out in Egypt, they were rekindled in other parts of the world by men and women who understood the value of what had been lost. The scattered remnants of the Alexandrian collection began a long and dangerous journey across the desert and the sea. They were carried in the saddlebags of merchants and hidden in the robes of fleeing monks. These surviving scrolls found a new home in the House of Wisdom in Baghdad during the Islamic Golden Age. Here the caliphs gathered scholars from every faith and paid them the weight of a book in gold for every translation they produced. It was in Baghdad that the mathematics of Euclid and the astronomy of Ptolemy were not only preserved but expanded upon. The scholars there corrected the ancient calculations and added new discoveries of their own, keeping the intellectual fire burning while Europe slept in the darkness of the early Middle Ages. From Baghdad, this knowledge traveled west again, across North Africa and into Spain. In the great libraries of Cordoba and Toledo, the spirit of Alexandria was revived. Jewish and Muslim and Christian scholars worked side by side to translate the Arabic texts into Latin. This movement of translation was the spark that eventually ignited the European Renaissance. When you look at the notebooks of Leonardo da Vinci or the architectural drawings of Brunelleschi, you are seeing the distant ripples of the stone dropped in the water by the librarians of Alexandria. The scientific method itself, which drives our modern world, is a direct descendant of the questions asked by the men and women who walked the colonnades of the Mausoleum. Every university and every laboratory and every library in the world today is a spiritual colony of that first great experiment in Egypt. In our own time, the dream of a universal library has finally returned to the place of its birth. In the year 2002, the Bibliotheca Alexandrina was opened on the shores of the Mediterranean, just a few hundred feet from where the ancient library is believed to have stood. It is a building of breathtaking ambition, designed to capture the light of the sun and the spirit of the past. The roof is a great disk of glass and aluminum that slopes toward the sea, representing the rising sun of knowledge. The exterior walls are made of gray granite from Aswan, the same stone used by the pharaohs, and they are carved with characters from 120 different scripts. These letters do not form words, but stand as a texture of human communication, a visual reminder that the library belongs to every culture and every language. Inside the new library, there is a vast reading room that can hold 2,000 people. It is a terraced space filled with light, where the roof is supported by slender columns that recall the lotus flowers of ancient Egypt. There is a planetarium that projects the stars just as Aristarchus once observed them, and a manuscript restoration laboratory where modern science is used to heal old books. The library houses millions of books in paper form, but it also houses a massive digital archive. It contains a copy of the Internet Archive, preserving the digital history of the world just as the ancient scribes preserved the papyrus history. It is a sanctuary where the past and the future meet. The existence of this new library is a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. It proves that while wars and fires and ignorance can destroy the vessels of knowledge, they cannot destroy the hunger for it. We are a species that remembers. We build libraries because we know that our time is short, but our collective knowledge is immortal. We write down our stories and our discoveries so that those who come after us will not have to start from nothing. The Library of Alexandria is not just a historical tragedy, it is a symbol of our endurance. It reminds us that we are all part of a single great conversation that has been going on for thousands of years, and that will continue long after we are gone. And so we leave the city of Alexandria. The sun has set over the harbor, and the lighthouse is dark, but the stars are shining clearly in the velvet sky. The waves of the Mediterranean continue to wash against the shore with a rhythm that has not changed since the days of Cleopatra. The air is cool and smells of salt and jasmine. The great halls are quiet now, and the scrolls are resting in their shelves. The scribes have put down their pens, and the scholars have closed their eyes. The world is at peace, and the knowledge of the ages is safe. Let this sense of safety and continuity wrap around you like a warm blanket. You are part of this long story, and you can rest now knowing that the wisdom of the past is preserving the promise of the future. Sleep well,